To my knowledge, this is the South African Drug Policy Week is the only event of this kind on the African continent. I have heard of the progress made in South Africa just in 2 years' time, and I was very reassured by what we heard from the National Drug Committee tonight. But I believe that a conference bringing stakeholders from health to criminal justice, law enforcement, civil society is a sort of ideal setting to discuss issues that are still controversial in many countries, many societies. Now, Africa is just opening up to the problem. Africa is realizing that it has a problem, whereas it has been thinking that it has no problem for many years. I quoted Kofi Annan tonight, a former member now, and of our Global Commission on Drug Policy. And Kofi has repeatedly said how worried, concerned he is about the African countries. More and more trafficking routes go through Africa, be it West Africa or the coastal zones of Eastern and Southern Africa. Wherever there's trafficking and transit, there's consumption. Where there's consumption, unless you have enlightened policies, you will have HIV/AIDS and a number of harms for the poor policies that are currently the practice here. Well, to me, ambitious changes. Harm reduction is a necessity. It's an urgent need because of the health threat, but it's not an end. The next step is decriminalizing possession of drugs for personal use. And I do believe that what is happening now in South Africa on marijuana is a first step. But I have been saying that I personally, and as a member of the Global Commission, I do not see why other drugs should also not be decriminalized. Why should marijuana be the exception? What is actually wrong in someone using a drug without doing any harm to others? Why can I consume alcohol? Why can I smoke? Why can I drive like crazy and not use a drug responsibly? So decriminalization is the next step. And then I think put ourselves an ambitious step. And the ambitious step is ending prohibition. Because if you really try and rethink out of the usual sort of frames, why do we prohibit drugs? Why do we, when everything that is dangerous is regulated? Driving a car is very dangerous, but it's regulated. You stop at traffic lights. You drive on the left-hand side. You give priority at a roundabout. You do not prohibit people from driving cars because driving is dangerous. You do not prohibit people from drinking alcohol. You promote responsible, controlled drinking of alcohol. Why prohibit drugs? Which is the result of prohibition is generating a huge illegal black market. It's leading to an HIV epidemic, including in South Africa. Part of the AIDS epidemic is linked with sharing needles. It's leading to hepatitis C infections, to a public health threat in tuberculosis. It's leading to policing human abuses, people being arrested, people being incarcerated, people's life being ruined by an absurd criminal record for what? For something that people should be able to responsibly control. And the role of government should be there to help and assist rather than to be punitive. So to answer your question, next step to me, decriminalization of possession for personal use, and with the ambition of moving from prohibition to regulation. Well, I think the example that Canada is giving to the world is that despite the international conventions of which Canada is part, of course, would prohibit legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes, as Canada is doing, Canada says, I believe that it is for the health and welfare of my citizens that I'm doing this. And the way they have chosen to do it is to say, we ask, what we will do is respectful non-compliance of the conventions. And I expect, you know, as the world really understand the sort of absurdity and harm of the current approaches to drug policies, that more and more countries will actually go to respectful non-compliance, or what we also call in diplomatic language reservations, you know, and little by little, those very tough conventions will be somehow eroded, and one day they will have to be rediscussed. But at this time, I don't think South Africa or any other country, how powerful it is, can really think of a reasonable probability that conventions should be discussed. But South Africa and the African continent, because there is very little in terms of drug policy on the continent, is at a sort of, you know, at an edge where it can go either on very tough repressive policies or use the opportunity of moving towards progressive policies. West Africa has recently, under the leadership of Kofi Annan and former president of Nigeria, Obasanjo, has gone to designing a model drug law for West Africa. I think Eastern and Southern Africa, that have so much in common between countries in terms of the drugs they're facing, the drug issues they're facing, should come together and take the opportunity of the current wave of new thinking around drugs to move into progressive policies and really save lives and improve the life of people who use drugs across the continent.